Thank you, Visiwe, and welcome to the Sandton Convention Centre. It is the 24th of August, the third and final day of the 15th BRICS Summit here at the Convention Centre. And it's been quite eventful, and not just here, but of course across the world as well. Many political developments taking place. And I'm here with our international editor, Sophie Mokoena, just to reflect on some of what has been happening. Sophie, let's just start with Zimbabwe and the situation there. We know that, it was a bumpy lead up to this election. But of course, now we hear that the poll time has been extended. Let's talk about what's happening there.
Well, indeed, there were many people at different polling stations, and it looks like, again, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is found wanting, and therefore they had to extend voting time. And yesterday, late last night, the president of Zimbabwe did put a gazette to extend voting time. And as we speak, thousands and thousands of Zimbabweans are in the queues, and they slept at polling stations so that they can cast their ballot. And I think when I listened to one of the observers, he was very concerned, who's leading the SADC mission in terms of state of readiness. And they were warned. ZEC was warned. ZEC was warned. They can't come and say they didn't have enough voting material. They have a voter's roll. You can't have a voter's roll and you don't prepare properly. And they hogged that voter's roll. They hogged it. They didn't release that voter's roll. And now you have this situation. And it will affect, of course, the outcome of the elections in terms of the fairness and the credibility thereof. Because what must people do? People must go back to work. People must travel back to wherever they came from. As you know that many people are outside the country. And therefore, ZEC is found wanting.
Not surprisingly, though, because many people did anticipate that there would be some or other shenanigans playing out during this particular poll. But I suppose the more important question at this point is, what do the regional and the other organs of state, continental organs do in the aftermath of how this election has played out?
I don't know what are they going to do, because the reality is they will have to reflect the reality in terms of their reports. I know that some of them are going to say we can't make pronouncement now in terms of the free and the fairness of elections, but elections were peaceful. When they say that, you must know there's a problem. And therefore, I think this is the only way out. They can't make a comprehensive report now. And therefore, I think it's a serious problem. And SADC, our regional body, must also take responsibility, because they should have anticipated these challenges and intervened in terms of the organ on politics, defense and security that is charged with the responsibility to ensure that in the region, in terms of political issues and environment, everything is in place. And therefore, President Geingob, the outgoing chair of SADC, should have really requested a proper report in terms of state of readiness, particularly from the Electoral Commission.
Well, he, of course, landed here in South Africa yesterday afternoon. I don't think we'll be able to get to these presidents to maybe speak to them, but hoping they are watching and hoping they are hearing the questions that are being asked. Moving on, another big story yesterday, Sophie, the Wagner Group leader who is reported to have been killed in a plane crash. Let's talk about what's happening there and, of course, how that fits into some of the geopolitical shifts that we are talking about at the moment.
Well, he was on the continent. As you know, that this group is operating on the continent in Central Africa, in Mali, in Sudan, in Libya, to name the few. And therefore, I think on their way back, this is what could have happened. You know that Libya in particular, we saw the leadership of Wagner, some of them, meeting the general, Khalifa Haftar. You know that he's fighting with the current government in Libya, the interim government. And therefore, he could have been on the continent for such visit. But also, you know, there's a problem in Niger. And you know that some countries have issued statements that should the ECOWAS, the regional body, deploy military or military intervention in Niger. They will support the military in Niger. And therefore, there were reports that they are also banking on, or they are hoping that Wagner will come to their rescue, because they are assisting in Central Africa, they are in Burkina Faso and Mali. So I don't know whether that was part of the whole mission, but this speaks to the fact that the problem is on our doorstep as a continent. And that is why when we always say, as Africa, as South Africa, we are not an island. We are not immune to the external factors of peace and stability or economic shocks. This is a simple example that now this incident that has happened, that has attracted international reaction, and we cannot stand idling. And I am sure you are going to have more than 30 heads of state and government of Africa here today. And I think behind the scenes, and as they meet each other, this is something that they are going to talk about. You have the Foreign Affairs Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, who met the former president yesterday. And I think behind the scenes, people will be asking questions. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is here. And I think the issue of peace and security and stability, the world seems to be experiencing turbulent times, as the president of China, Xi Jinping, said yesterday.
Well, that's where we're going to leave it for now, because that's the update of stories and developments overnight internationally, as very clearly articulated there by our international editor, Sophie Mokoena. And of course, we'll touch more on some of these with our international guests. We'll have a media panel with some of the visiting journalists to the country, and we'll touch more on the Wagner Group, especially because we'll have one of our Russian counterparts on that panel. So much more to come here from the Sandton Convention Center and BRICS Day 3, the final day of the summit.